I want to thank all of you for coming, our officers who are out there all the time, risking their lives, protecting us.
So if I may say, the finest officers, District 1 officers back there, that's Sergeant Peckrell with his team. Let's give it up. That's right.
Michael doesn't need a microphone. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd all rise, please, and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have a number of speakers tonight, but before we get into the speakers, Bill Brown, my associate on the board, is going to do the roll call. So when your organization is called, please state your name and raise your hand so he can record it. Bill?
Can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to start with the officers and directors first. Michael Albetta.
Here.
Melinda Boker.
She's here.
Okay. I'm present. Jim Concannon's present. Christine Jones. Abby Loeffner. Carol Lockwood. Marilyn Mamano. Mary Peliquin. J.J. Rader. Kathy Stutz. Dennis Huber. Lynn Winters. Okay, so we have 4 officers or directors present. Neighborhood associations. Bermuda Riviera. Beverly Heights Neighborhood Association. Birch Park Homeowners. Breakwater Homes. Central Beach. Myself. Central City. Coley Hammock. Coral Ridge Country Club Estates. Coral Ridge Association. Coral Ridge Isles HOA. Coral Shores Civic Association. Croissant Park. Dolphin Isles. Downtown Fort Lauderdale Civic Association. Linda's here. Edgewater Civic. Flagler Village.
Here. John Williams.
Galt Mile. Golden Heights. Harbordale. Harbor Beach. Harbor Inlet.
Here.
Historical Dorsey River Bend. Home Beautiful Park Civic Association. Idlewild. Imperial Point. Lake Air Civic Association.
Here.
Lake Ridge. Michael.
Here.
Landings Residential. Lauderdale Beach. Steve, I see you here. Lauderdale Harbor Improvement.
Here.
Lauderdale Isles Civic Improvement. Lauderdale Manors.
Here.
Okay. That's Kathy, right? Or that's Christine Jones. Okay. Laudergate Isles. Mass District. Melrose Heights. Melrose Manor. Middle River Terrace. Nurmi Isles. Palm Air Village. Ponsettia Heights. Concierge Park. Progresso Village. Rio Vista. River Gardens. Riverland. River Landings. River Oaks. Riverside. Rock Island. Sailboat Bend. Seven Isles. Shady Banks. Sunrise Intercoastal, I have you, Jim. South Middle River. Tarpon River. Victoria Park. We have 21 neighborhoods and 5 officers, so that's 26.
We're just determining if we have a quorum. Do we have a quorum? Yeah. Very good. We have a quorum. Mary's not here, as I said, and I don't know if I'll have to use this, but her bell's here, and I'm not afraid to use it. So, let me start off by introducing Laura McCoy. She is with Neighborhood Support, and she has a really nice, a very short presentation, but an award that was presented to the city. I think she'll describe that. And so, Laura, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for having me. Again, Laura McCoy, Senior Management Fellow in the Office of Neighbor Support. So before I start, I just want to share a little video. This is regarding the Neighborly Lunches program that about 13 or so civic associations are a part of. So we're just going to play it real quickly.
When I got down to the community court, I was overwhelmed with how well the city had put together a program that offered almost 30 different resources for the homeless people, the showers, the haircuts. And the only thing missing were the lunches, and the lunches were previously provided by a company who stopped
That's Christine
sending
Jones
them.
next to Michael.
And the people at the community court mentioned that it had affected their membership because the people were not coming in because the lunches weren't there. And when I asked how many lunches they need, they said 25. I said, no problem, I'll do that in my kitchen. And here is Joey. Joey is on our board. He is the chair of Green Year Routine, and he's doing 15 ham and cheese. And we've got 15 PB&Js, which is this table here. This is our PB&J assembly line. And this is Fallon and Reese. Reese, give me a hi, Reese. Hola. And this is Lisa, their grandmother, and my best friend. And it's just, I believe, a wonderful act of citizens of Fort Lauderdale to show their respect and show their support of this
22
community.
HOAs.
As I said,
Because
the
Leanne
lunches
came
that
in
we're
and
doing
then
here
5
is just
officers.
a small fragment of what's being offered at the community court for the homeless people in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay, so again, that was the Neighborly Lunches program, and I just want to say how proud I am of all the 13 civic associations that show up and provide these lunches to our community court every week. And because of that, we were able to win first place in the multi-neighborhood partnerships over at NUSA in El Paso last month in May.
Nice.
So,
Big round of
thank you
applause.
all. Okay, and that's it.
Anything else you want to say about the program? Because it's really a great opportunity for neighborhoods to participate in this effort to try to get
Yeah.
food to the homeless for lunches.
Definitely. So like Lynn said, it brings around 30 or so providers every Wednesday, but food is always one of those scarce resources that we constantly need for community core. And through your partnerships, we're able to always feed any homeless client that comes through those doors. Yes. So it was being held at Holiday Park, and I know we're working on getting a new location starting next week. So next week, can I say the location? All right, it's gonna be at this location called Operation Sacred Trust, 201 Southeast Second Avenue, in front of the Greenwise. So every Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Yep, there's gonna be a shower bus, a medical bus, an HIV sprinter bus.
Can you repeat that address again, please?
201 Southeast Second Avenue. It's in front of the Greenwise, the Publix Greenwise. Yeah, by the Pink Church. Yep. Any other questions? I'm sorry? The date, it's every Wednesday. Every Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Great location. Everybody, excuse me, is everyone familiar with this location? Huh? Okay. It's very easy. It's Broward Boulevard. You make if you're going towards the bridge, on, was it 3rd Avenue? Is it 3rd Avenue Bridge? Yeah. And there's Greenwise right on that corner there. It's almost barren look. There's a lot of homeless in that area, and that church opens its heart. That church, I'm with St. Anthony's Homeless Ministry, and that's why I'm if you don't mind. That church there, every once a year in December, they have memorial for the homeless, of those homeless people that died, and the unknown names. They light a candle for them, and it's a beautiful ceremony at the holiday time. It's a very and they open up those doors there. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Second Avenue, unless Louisa, can you correct me? Just confirming it.
No, you're correct. You're correct.
Is there a website or something, because people ask me about this, and I tell them that happens on Wednesdays, like how can they?
A community core website? Yeah, so I actually worked on that. If you go to the fortlauderdale.gov website, under neighbors, there's a section called Office of Neighbor Support. Once you click that, it's our entire website, and there's a sub-page dedicated to community court. So it'll say community court on the sub-page. Any other questions? All right, well, it was a pleasure again, and congratulations to all who participated in this program, and I'm very thankful and proud of you all.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. It is a great program. You know, it's a good example of how the community bands together to create a community. The old saying is, it takes a village, and I think this is a really good example. So I want to bring up our next speaker, Daphne Sandville. Daphne is the manager of external affairs and government relations, which translated means that she's in Tallahassee a lot, probably more than she wants to be at times, I'm sure. And she is a liaison for the city of Fort Lauderdale and the legislators in Tallahassee. Our voice, and perhaps someone who can try to influence things in behalf of the city. Daphne?
I don't know. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me now? Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Tallahassee does that. It's like a time warp. You never know what time it is. You don't know what day it is. I'm still recovering. My watch goes off. But Daphne Sainville, I am the government affairs manager for the city of Fort Lauderdale. Not only do I go to Tallahassee, but I also encounter those elected officials in DC as well. So I handle the federal legislative priorities for the city. What I wanted to ask, I kind of do my presentations a little bit differently, simply because the governor has not signed the budget yet. He hasn't put out his veto list yet, and he's, I don't think, in Tallahassee right now. He's probably campaigning somewhere. I don't know, Ohio, Wisconsin, Canada, who knows? Texas. But I digress, but I wanted to know what specific questions did you have about policy or legislation or the way that things work? And then maybe I can craft answers based on the questions you have for me. Does that sound like a plan? All right.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Yeah, I got it. It's my business. Sorry about that. I'm not doing my job.
You can be the official mic guy.
Here we go. Sorry about that.
Our HOA magazine had an article about the neighborhoods, obviously, in Fort Lauderdale. But there was a state fine of $2.1 million for some sewer problem. And that fine was levied against the city, but it can be offset by projects in the community. You're familiar with that, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Could you expand on that and how that, anybody here from HOA could apply a project for quality of water, a seawall? They mentioned seawall specifically. Susie Bailey wrote the article.
Right. So I am familiar with the program and the way that we can offset a fine for any type of pipe breaks. I don't know the exact specifics as to how an HOA itself can apply versus the city applying, or the city going up to Tallahassee and saying, instead of levying this fine against an HOA or an HOA association president or a board, writing the letter to DEP, which is who would most likely levy that type of fine, but I can definitely get that information out for you.
Daphne, behind you here.
I was like, whoa.
A couple things if you could cover. Rental units that tried to get added on at the 11th hour this last session that didn't happen, and we think it's coming up next session, if you would talk a little bit about that. And then it's where if an HOA files a lawsuit against a developer and whoever wins or loses the case, I think it was in the legislation that the losing party is obligated to pay the other's attorney fees. So if you could talk about those two.
Okay, so the rental units, I think you're talking about vacation rentals?
Yes.
My favorite. Been dealing with it since the county. So vacation rentals, thankfully that bill died, but we do know it is going to be coming back next year. The plan or the strategy that we have is to utilize our 4 contract lobbyists that we hire on the state level. So I crack the whip, make them work, is for them to get us in front of Tallahassee before session and possibly get DSD and other stakeholders at the table to talk about why local control is extremely important when it comes to vacation rentals. I do know there is that concern with a lot of the residents that there are party houses, that there's trash, that there's noise, but you do have to understand that every time we open up that can of worms, it goes above and beyond the initial intent. So yes, local government right now can control party houses. Where's Chris? Yes, Chris. Tell me if I'm wrong. We can control the noise, we can control nuisance, trash, we have code enforcement that goes out, and it's simply because we have those ordinances in place. Current legislation allows us to do that. The legislation that they were trying to pass this year would have preempted local government from enacting and enforcing that ordinance. It would have taken us all the way back to 2011 ordinances where we could not do that, where we could not properly enforce those quote-unquote party houses. So I just want everybody to keep that in mind, that while we do fight against some type of legislation against vacation rentals, we also have to keep in mind that preemption is always going to be in any type of state legislation. The state loves to preempt local government. Their favorite line is, "We created you, we can take you away." And my favorite response is, "Go ahead." We can keep all of our money. And they laugh. And then, the bill dies. So I like to pat myself on the shoulder and say I did it, but it's a team effort, it's a group effort. The large cities, there are 423 cities. We have the Florida League of Cities that actively fights against it, that is constantly in the background negotiating. So whenever you don't see anything coming out from the city side or me responding and saying what we're doing, it's simply because we're trying to broker those deals on the back end, and we don't want people to know on the front end that we're trying to broker deals with leadership in order to get things going. So the hierarchy of everything is we get everything through leadership, it goes to the governor, or it goes to whose issue it is. So vacation rentals previously was the Senate president's, Pasadomo. Kathleen Pasadomo, that was her thing, you know? She wanted it, but this year she wanted housing. So she got her affordable housing bill, and then she kind of let vacation rentals go wherever it went, and it went to what we call the, you know, the black hole of dead bills. But we do know it is gonna come back next year. We are going to work on making sure that what local government needs is to not be preempted, that we need each citizen to say, and, you know, take the time to write and craft not a form letter, because form letters go in the blue bin. If everybody from this association is writing the same letter with the same complaint, it goes in the blue bin, because what the left side is doing, the right side is not experiencing the same thing. So your letters shouldn't reflect the same thing. Your letters should reflect your unique experience with what is happening. I've called the city. The city did what it's supposed to do. Oftentimes, those form letters disregard what the city is actually doing. We are trying very hard to resolve all issues. It could be the homeowner. It's the homeowner who's not responding to the fines. It's the homeowner who's not responding to the phone calls. So say, we need you to give local government more control, not less control, in order to help us sleep at night, in order for our kids to sleep at night. I have a 4-year-old niece. She hates sleeping. You put a party house down the street, she's gonna be up partying with them. Like, we don't want that. We want it to be safe, and that's what the city strives to do. That's what I strive to do when I go up to Tallahassee. So yeah, vacation rentals, thankfully it died that last week. We pulled out all the stops, we begged, pleaded, it worked, but do know it is gonna come back. We are gonna come back and ask you for your help in, you know, drafting letters or in calling your senators, calling your representatives, on both sides of the aisle. There are Republicans who hate it, there are Democrats who love it. There are Republicans who love it, and there are Democrats who hate it. It's a bipartisan issue. It doesn't matter what party you're about, it's about the needs of the community. So make sure that is what is expressed when you do talk to your representative, your local representative. Money. Money. And the fact that they can preempt local government. They feel that the Department of Professional Regulation, DPPR, has the ability to maintain the registration and the licenses and the enforcement for whatever's happening on the local level. That rationale doesn't make sense to us, but it makes sense to them.
I work with a couple of parochial schools in Broward County. Is there any money to help them with security around their physical structure from the state?
When you say security, do you mean like hardening the building,
Right.
SROs?
Maybe even the manpower to monitor it?
Yes. So, I do not remember the bill number, but it is that in that school voucher bill that came out, where there are an extra $8,000 go to residents or families. It throws out the income threshold. I believe there is a pocket of money in there for hardening school buildings, and it comes down almost in a particular formula. So public schools get something, charter schools get something, and private, which is parochial schools, also get something for security.
Okay. And what was the name of that bill?
I believe it's called the school choice bill. It's
Yeah.
it's what we dub it, but I know which one you're talking about. I'll go through it again to see what exactly was in it. I know that one wasn't at the very top of my list. So This year, 1,282 bills were filed.
You don't
And-
know them all, huh?
And out of all of them, I followed about 450.
Okay.
And out of that 450 I followed, I think 100 or so actually passed, and they're awaiting the governor's signature. But overall, out of the 1,200 bills that were filed, only 250 bills passed in total.
In the bill, does it show or tell us how to apply for that funding?
It would, and you said you own the parochial school, correct? Or
I work with
you
some
work with them?
parochial schools, yes.
Yeah, it should tell you how to apply for it. If it doesn't, that wouldn't be a surprise. You can tell, I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, I'll pull the bill and look for it, then,
Yeah, I'll
Go from
pull it,
there.
I'll send it, and what I am working on right now is a final report of everything that happened during legislative session. The legislature has put out their session summaries for all the bills that have passed. So I can also send the association the House summaries, so you can see and go through all the bills that passed, the summaries of each one. And when the governor finishes doing whatever he's doing, he has until July 1st to sign everything.
okay. Can we get on your mailing list to see those
No.
summaries?
No.
No?
Of
Right.
course, yes,
All right,
yes.
how do I do that? Give you my email address?
What is the easiest way?
I'll be
Just
putting
sending
out
it?
your information and in the minutes.
Okay,
So it'll be out there. It'll go out in the
Very good.
minutes, and you'll also have it on the recording if you want to just say it.
yeah, so my email is my first initial, which is D as in dog, my last name, Sainville, S as in Sam, A-I-N as in Nancy, V as in victorious, I as in igloo, and L as in love. Did I do that right?
Of course you did. Love wins.
L, one L. Oh, is there two? Ah, no. Yeah, you stop at the first L. Do not pass that first L. Do not pass go. At fortlauderdale.gov. So during session, I try to send out weekly updates, but what happens because session is only 60 days, it ends up being as needed. So if you do ask me for particular pieces of legislation, I can definitely send that to you versus waiting at the end of the week or the next week to get a 2-week report. So I'm a team of 2 right now. So it's just me and my admin, and I'm the one that's doing all the traveling and everything. So please bear with me if I don't get with you right away. But and my phone number, you can always text me or call me at 954-299-7806. That is my work mobile. That's probably dangerous to give,
That
but
was very
sure, go
brave.
for it.
That was brave.
It's not my personal number, so I guess I'm safe. Right.
I think we have another.
You have another question right there.
Yep, let me just interject real quickly. If you have a question, please state your name so that we can have that on the record. Yes, it's just part of the file record that we keep. Thank you.
My name is Ed Revel. Everyone knows who you are.
We know you, Ed.
No, it's
All right.
but
My name is Barbara Haggerty, Shady Bank Civic Association. We had 170 of our homes out of the 500 flood during this last storm, and the city has been telling us that they have no money to put in drains in our neighborhood. Does the state have any type of programs or funding that the city can access?
Yes and no. So there is a list, and it depends on the drainage system that we're trying to put in. We'll talk offline. I want to know who at the city is telling you that we don't have money. I do know we have some major projects that we are working on, which is connecting pipes and infrastructure for drainage systems. It's just a matter of getting the permits and everything done, going through the procurement process, permitting process.
Who is in charge at the city hall?
1 second. like to underscore what you're saying. Bill Brown, he has some, the city.
Bill Brown, I also sit on the city's Budget Advisory Board, and we're going through the budget process. Part of the Stormwater Capital Improvement Investment Plan is a 5-year plan that lists all the projects. Shady Banks is on it, but it's not on the high priorities of the neighborhoods. As last month we heard from Alan Dodd, they're doing a tertiary or a tier system, taking 10 projects this physical budget year and 10 next. The commission at the last meeting, just last week, approved a $210 million bond for stormwater sewer systems. The city does not have the money in the sewer fund, so we're having to bond that money out for these projects. But all the neighborhoods have been evaluated, and they have been prioritized, and I know it's on that 5-year plan, capital investment improvement plan. So I don't want you to think your neighborhood's not, but it's based on the needs of those particular neighborhoods that get the highest priority right now.
How many homes, a percentage of homes that flooded, or, 170 out of 500 seems like a high percent.
I can't answer that. That's a Public Works question, because they're the ones that submit the priorities to the Budget Advisory Board.
I would recommend, as we talked about out in the hallway before the meeting, I would recommend that you contact Alan Dodd's office. Sometimes just, a subtle reminder might move things along a little bit. So I would recommend you do that.
And that list, because it was discussed at the commission meeting, would probably be attached as an exhibit, and that's available for the public to see. So you would be able to see where you are, where Shady Banks is on the list and how much has been appropriated for that particular project. And then I believe it has timelines on there as well. If not, Alan Dodd's office would be able to provide you with those timelines.
And they move up and down on that list based on what it is. This, 2 years out on the budget cycle or 3, and then if it becomes a priority, like many of them just did because of the flooding, they jumped up a year or 2 in advance. But it's a 5-year master plan.
His presentation actually was attached to the meeting minutes last time. So Christopher Leonard,
We can't hear you. Could you pass a microphone over to that gentleman? And we're going to take one more question, and it could be.
Sure. So Christopher Leonard, Sweeting Estates. I was just going to add the information that Daphne mentioned actually was attached as a PowerPoint that Alan did. It had the neighborhood list and the projects and the timelines. So it's attached to the meeting minutes on the Civic Association's website for last meeting.
Would that be Shady Banks website? You said.
What's your civic association?
So I mentioned it, Sweeting Estates, River Garden. So again, Christopher Leonard, River Garden, Sweeting Estates. So what I mentioned was when I was printing off the meeting minutes from last meeting here in this room, May 9th, the presentation by Alan actually is attached there, and it has the rankings and the projects that are in progress, the dates, and timelines. So what Daphne was mentioning that you could obtain, it's actually available on the website.
On the
for this
council's
meeting.
website. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yes.
That's been posted up there for a while now. So if you have a question about that, that would probably be very illustrative. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sean Williams from Flagler Village, and I wanted to know more about HB 1417 and HB 133, the housing bills regarding the rental deposit.
Just get me when
It
I
allows
don't have my
it allows
laptop.
it allows landlords to charge a monthly deposit that they may not get back, and there are concerns about it hurting renters.
In all honesty, I don't think those two were on my list. 133. I can check it when I come down for you.
Yeah, it was in the Sun Sentinel this I think Monday and then I'm reading it from it's HB 1417 and HB 133.
No.
And they're awaiting signatures from the governor right now.
Yeah. Let me check those, and then your specific question pertaining.
Well,
to
we have
that?
a lot of renters in Flagler Village, and you know, it allows people to move into an apartment without that, you know, first and last, so they can spread it out. But there's also no limitations to what the landlord can change, and that's a concern, like on a monthly basis. They're supposed to give them advance notice, but there's
Sometimes
just
they
a
don't.
lot of concerns in the bill.
Okay, all right, I will check. And if the governor has not signed it yet, I would definitely recommend you reach out to, who is your district commissioner? I believe that's Glassman. Reach out to Commissioner Glassman's office and urge him to, I'm setting myself up for this. Write a letter to the governor to veto the bill. That would be the best case scenario, outlining your reasons why, especially with those concerns. And then I know one more, was it the housing bill?
No, it was if an HOA or an organization brings a civil suit against a developer or the city, and that organization or that party loses beginning July 1st, they're obligated to pay the winning parties.
The attorney's fees, yes,
And that includes municipalities too,
correct.
which puts them in a kind of precarious position. if I'm
Correct. So it goes both ways. So if there is a development, there's a lawsuit because it violates you believe it violates the comprehensive plan, or you just think that development and the municipality is not acting correctly, you lose as the homeowner, you pay the city's attorney's fees. And vice versa. If a lawsuit is filed and we lose, we pay your attorney's fees. Developers, same thing. So as a homeowner, it's basically saying, it's not chilling speech, but it is basically saying, be wary and make sure you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Because if you file that lawsuit, be sure that you're gonna win. If you're not gonna win, then you're SOL. Yeah,
Daphne, there's a difference between filing a lawsuit and just taking a position, I believe.
correct.
So if a neighborhood wanted to go to the city commission, for example,
And take a position.
and say, we don't approve of this, and this is the reason why. There's countless cases out there. I mean, Bahia Mar would be a kind of a volatile one, but that's one that would come to mind recently.
Right.
That's different. We're talking about a lawsuit.
Correct. You're
Right.
talking about a
I wanna make
lawsuit,
that
not
clear.
not just opposing opinion, where you actually engage attorneys on both ends and depositions. Oh my gosh, as a lawyer, I should remember this. It's the weather. It's the lack of caffeine.
All right.
the Florida Land Use
Yeah.
Development Act.
Correct. And I have a summary on that in the final report. I have a mini report that's coming out. That summary is quickly going to be in there as well, just outlining the pros and cons of that particular piece of legislation.
Great. Daphne, thank you. Thank you very much.
I know you,
What's that?
are you time constrained? There was one bill that I
Go-
did
go,
want to
please,
mention.
please.
And that was the affordable housing bill.
Very important.
It's like when you get up here, you want to perform. So Senate Bill 102 was that major comprehensive affordable housing bill that, I should have my notes, but I kind of memorized it, where we are incentivizing developers to build more affordable housing units because the state as a whole, well, the country as a whole is facing a housing crisis. State of Florida is facing a housing shortage. We can't develop more than people are migrating in from all over, Texas, California, New York, Michigan, because I used to live there, it's very cold, all over the country. So what President Passidomo did was made it her priority to pass a bill. It may not be a perfect bill because there are some downsides that Chris will get into. So I'm setting him up for this. But it does encourage more affordable units to be built at certain percentage thresholds, the AMI thresholds. The only thing that a lot of municipalities and counties have focused on is the comprehensive zoning and the fact that it says you can build within a mile of a particular residency and go to maximum height, density, and all of that. Did I encapsulate that? Kind of. I'm getting there. Getting there. That's not my thing, but that's Chris's thing. But that is going to be a concern, is that condos are going to be built in residential areas, in a nutshell. And while this, like 40 stories high, 44 stories, up to 400 feet in the air. And the concern is that it's going to be like literally right next door to your single family home, because it's within that 1 mile radius that the bill provides for. There are some cities that say it's not a problem. There are some counties that say it's not a problem because they've drawn the maps. I believe we've drawn some maps to see, what potential developments could go up. We did bring it to the governor's attention. We did bring it to leadership's attention. They did acknowledge that while the bill may be flawed, it can come back and get fixed. And that's pretty much what I want to leave everybody with, is that while they intend something to be very positive and very good, it sometimes ends up very flawed, where they do preempt local governments from doing certain things in order to enact other things. But there's always next year, and there's always fixers. So there's always going to be a bill that's filed that we encourage our representatives on the House side and on the Senate side to file. So we're always looking to fix whatever bills come about. So please keep that in mind, that while there are the negatives, there are the positives, and then there's always next year where we can fix it. And that's when I plan on having my team, myself, come to more HOA Civic Association meetings, see where the residents' concerns lies, and to see what bills can be filed on your behalf. And it's always up to our members to file those bills. Sometimes they don't want to because they're in leadership positions, or they're about to be in a leadership position, and we want them to be in that particular position, because the higher they are to the top, the better it is for our policy bills to get defeated, but also for our appropriations to get put into the state budget. This year, we asked for 9 projects. We got 5, and out of the 5, we were appropriated 4, which totaled $1.577 million. We're still waiting for the governor's veto list to come down. I've been hearing there's 1 project on there. I've heard there was 1, it came off. So all in all, we did well this session. We could have done better, but we did well considering the political landscape that's out there, and it's right before an election season. So keep in mind, election seasons, things usually look up. After the election season, things pretty much plateau, and then they ramp up again. So that's just something I want to leave everybody with. We are working very hard to make sure we mitigate negative impacts, we mitigate the negative impacts of bills, and we try to fight against preempting local authority. We need your help. I'll let you know when we need your help, but definitely you have my number, you have my email. I'll send you the rest of my contact details. You can literally find me in the Tower 101 building. And if you can't find me, call Louisa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daphne. This is the workings behind the scene that we don't see, and this is the things that impact all of us on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. Thank you for everything you do. Let me introduce our next speaker, Chris Cooper. Come on down. Chris is the Director of Building Services for the City of Fort Lauderdale. Christopher I call him Christopher, Chris, has been here 5 years, and prior to that is with the City of Gainesville for 11 years. Chris, I think, has quite a lot of things that he'd like to talk about regarding building services and the impact on our community. Do you have a PowerPoint?
I do. I don't know
Yeah.
if there's a
Clyde?
clicker for it.
Oh, I'll get it.
So while I'm waiting on the clicker, I'll go ahead and introduce myself again. I'm Chris Cooper. I'm the Director of the Development Services Department for the City of Fort Lauderdale. As Jim said, I've been in that role for about a year now, but I've been with the City of Fort Lauderdale for about 5.5 years now. So our department, if you don't know, it really handles anything that's related to the development process, from reviewing development applications for new projects all the way through building permitting and into code enforcement to make sure those developments and projects stay compliant into the future. So I want to start off kind of where Daphne left off. Let's see if this is down. Got it. Okay. So I'm going to start with the Live Local Act, and that's that bill that Daphne talked about. That's the affordable housing bill. And I want to talk about it more in the context of its impacts on development than affordable housing in general. So like anything the state does, you know, you get the good with the bad, right? So as Daphne mentioned, there's some things in this bill that are problematic and that are concerning to us, but there's also some things that are good for our community. So the first thing I want to talk about is the bill provides an additional $2 million to the city in our SHIP funds. And the SHIP funds are funds that come from the state that help us provide affordable housing to the low and very low income population. And we use these funds to do things like housing rehab and to provide down payment assistance for people that make under 80% of our local area median income. And why this is important is because probably since the 90s, the state of Florida has taken the trust fund that these funds come out of and really cut it down to really almost nothing to fund other things in the state. And so this is one of the first years that I can recall since probably the 90s where the state's actually fully funded that trust fund. And that trust fund is funded out of your doc stamp payments that you make when you do a real estate transaction. So again, this is a big win for us. So, you know, good things can come out of these bills once in a while from Tallahassee. So another thing that this bill does that is good is it removes a lot of the impediments to providing affordable housing and developing new affordable housing, which is great. But what it does is it kind of creates a policy in a very broad way. So it's a statewide policy. It doesn't really take into consideration a lot of local issues and a lot of local interests. And one of those things that this bill has given us a little bit of pause and we're trying to figure out how to deal with is the fact that well, let me backtrack a little bit. So the bill itself allows for the development of affordable housing projects. That's a mixed-use project, so commercial and residential, on properties with zoning and land use that are non-residential or allow mixed use. So these are your commercial corridors, your residential mixed-use type neighborhoods, not your single-family neighborhoods, not your low-density neighborhoods that only allow residential, but again, those that have a commercial or non-residential land use and also allow for mixed use. What the issue for us is that what the bill states is that the maximum height for projects that can be built can be up to and equal to whatever the maximum height is within a mile of that parcel to be developed. So if you think about our downtown core, which has unlimited height, it's only governed by FAA and that limitation that the FAA places on the project, you go a mile out and you could conceivably have a project within that mile that's unlimited height. So again, that's an issue that we're trying to deal with. The other issue, and it's not as much of an issue, but density is something that a lot of people are concerned about. This bill allows for any project that's built with affordable housing in this mixed-use way that I described to be built at whatever the maximum density in the residential zoning district in the city. So again, downtown allows residential. There's no density limit downtown. So I think our interpretation, at least at this point, is that these projects could be built with unlimited density. So there's two ways developers can build under this plan. One is if they provide at least 10% affordable housing, and that's housing that's affordable to people that make up to 120% of the area median income, which for a lot of people in the community is workforce housing. That project can go through a regular development process. We can process that application just like any other project. We don't have to allow it, but we can review it and we can allow it and permit it. But if somebody comes in with a project that's at least 40% affordable, again, up to 120% of the area median income, we have to approve that project administratively. That means no planning and zoning board, that means no city commission, that means very little input from the elected officials, the appointed board members, or you as the community. So one thing that we've somewhat determined we're trying to kind of solidify this interpretation is that we can still apply most of our zoning regulations to these projects. So while the height may be what it can be, the density may be what it can be, we still think we can apply things like the setbacks in the areas that they're building, neighborhood compatibility, which I know is important to a lot of you and you deal with in your communities and developments in your neighborhoods, and also adequacy, so things like water sewer capacity, availability of services, things of that nature. So there's some things we think we can control, but again, the two big things that we really can't control are height and density. One thing that we've asked the commission for, and it's in the city manager's proposed budget, is to give us some funds to get a consultant to develop a mixed-use form-based code. We've wanted to do this for a while because we do allow mixed use in a lot of areas in our city, and a form-based code can really create predictability for us as the city, developers, and the community as to what those developments will look like in the future. It's more important now because of this new state law that we get that form-based code so that we can try to really hone in and make sure that we want these developments with the affordable housing, but we also want to make sure that they're the right developments for our community. So we're going to be working through that process. As Daphne said, we're going to be working with her to try to influence the state next year to go back and maybe make some adjustments to that bill. So another thing that the state did last year, and I think has had some impact on us in the community here in Fort Lauderdale, is they set very strict timelines for development review. So if any of you are familiar with the DRC process, that process involves a lot of back and forth between city staff, the developers, the community to really get those projects right. And by the end, we usually feel like there's a pretty good collaborative effort and a good result. But what the state did was they basically said if that project has an administrative review approval, which is DRC, if you all are familiar with that, which is a staff level approval, it can only take 120 days. So again, you take all that back and forth between the city, the applicant, the community, that time can go pretty quickly. If it requires a quasi-judicial approval, which is Planning and Zoning Board of the Commission or a commission call-up, it can only take 180 days. So this has been problematic. We had a project, I don't know if any of you are from the Hendricks Isles area, but we had a project several months ago that bumped up against this deadline. The city went to court, challenged the fact that, we didn't think we really passed that 180 days, that we should still have that ability to call it up and have that conversation, and we lost, right? So they proved that the state law is valid and effective, and we need to follow it. So we have done a couple things to address that. We have a code amendment that's coming forth over the summer. It'll go through Planning and Zoning Board and the Commission to essentially mimic what the state says in terms of the deadlines so that we can have better control over the process and make sure that these projects don't fall into that situation where we have to approve a project because a deadline's been reached. And we've also been very successful at getting waivers from applicants when they come in to apply. So in our development review process, we've had a lot of good luck with working with developers to get things right, and they want to work with us. So a lot of times they'll give us a waiver to extend that deadline, and really they understand that the outcome and the project will be best for us and the community, and we get the best results. So another thing that came out of our great state last year is the building safety program. So I don't know how many of you live in condos or know people in condos or have condos in your association, but the Broward County and Miami-Dade for a very long time has had a program where these buildings had to be certified by an engineer for structural and electrical inspections every 40 years and then every 10 years thereafter. So after Surfside, the state got together and they decided they need to make this a statewide policy, which also meant that we in Broward County had to go back and tweak our program to conform to what the state said. So starting this year, the new rule on this is that the first evaluation, the first milestone inspection is at 25 years. It was 40, now it's 25. So what that means is if your building is between 25 and 39 years right now, you're going to have to do that inspection this year. So we're getting a list from Broward County probably in the next couple weeks. The city is going to start reaching out to those properties that are affected by this with notices that you'll have to do these inspections and get those reports back into us. Once those reports come into us, if they're clear, we send them to Broward County, everything's good, you'll see us again in 10 years. If there's any deficiencies that need to be addressed, we give time to the condo to kind of get their boards together, raise money, whatever they need to do to fix those things, and we'll track that until those repairs are done. So we talked a little bit earlier about the flooding back in April, and again, it was quite an event here. I know a lot of folks were affected, and so what we're doing in DSD to help those folks, and what the commission did to help people, is that they created a program to essentially pay the building permit fees on behalf of the applicants for anybody doing flood repair. So they set aside about $400,000. We have a program within the building department that if somebody comes in and we can show that they're doing work related to flood repair, they won't pay a building permit fee. why that's important to tell you is because a lot of the times the contractors are the ones coming in and pulling permits. We want to make sure you and your neighbors know that you're getting this benefit, so essentially your contractors aren't charging you for something they're not paying for. But, this is something the city commission wanted to do. We were able to set the program up, and it's up and running right now. So if anybody had repairs prior to when that became effective, we're going to refund that money and make them whole again. We also have waived permit requirements for minor work. This isn't anything that falls under like structural or electrical or plumbing or mechanical. It's very minor stuff like fence repair and things like that, but we wouldn't charge for that. We're also allowing RVs and portable storage, understanding people may not be able to live in their homes or store their belongings, and we want to make sure that they have ways to still kind of use their property and feel at home. So we've allowed some of those things in the interim. And one thing I want to make clear is one thing we cannot waive is the substantial improvement threshold. And what that is if there's more than 50% of value in repairs to a home or structure, it has to be brought up to current code. So that's just something to keep in mind if you or your neighbors are trying to decide on what they want to do to their home. Maybe they want to do something in excess of just making repairs. It could come to a point where if you've increased that value to a point where that kicks in, you may have to do some extra work and bring things up to code and maybe some flood mitigation and things like that. So just something to consider. So I'm going to go through some things we're working on. So we're currently taking another run at the update to the landscape code. Some of you may remember we had a version of a landscape ordinance come to the commission last summer. A lot of work went into it, but when it came to a final vote, it ended in a tie, so we were not able to move forward with that. It essentially started the process back over from Planning and Zoning Board. So what we've done is we've gone back and we've bifurcated the project, and we've really focused on tree preservation, which I think is what the community was most concerned about, and so we want to make sure that we can get something done with that aspect of it and then maybe go back and look at the development side. So what we've worked on is an ordinance that looks at the costs for mitigation, the fees, the fines for violations and things like that, and tried to make them somewhat, we're trying to dissuade people from essentially cutting down the trees. So our mitigation fees were very, very low. They were like 20 years old. So the decision point for somebody to say, I'm going to take down a tree and pay this fine was pretty easy because the cost was very little. So we're looking at bringing those up to today's cost standards, and we're also looking at some of the fines and penalties related to that. We're also looking at incentives to get people to keep those old growth, desirable, and specimen trees. So again, it's more focused on tree preservation at this point. We'll come back later and take another run at the development standards in terms of what needs to be installed for new development, but we expect to get this to Planning and Zoning Board over the summer, probably July, maybe August, and then hopefully you'll see it back before the commission early fall. So another thing we're working on is public participation for level 2 projects. Level 2 projects are those projects that essentially meet code. You can call them by right developments. Basically, the project checks all the boxes in the land development code, so it doesn't go any further than the development review committee. In some cases, like downtown, they do go to the commission as a call-up, but there's really no requirement currently in the code for the developers to reach out and engage the public in these projects. So what we're proposing is that for level 2 projects citywide, that before DRC, the applicant themselves has to notify the Civic Association prior to that DRC meeting. For projects in regional activity centers, because they can tend to be a little bigger, a little more impactful, in addition to the pre-DRC notification, there will be a requirement, or we're proposing a requirement, that the applicant meets with the Civic Association prior to preliminary DRC approval. And so preliminary DRC approval is that stage between the DRC meeting and before that project goes to commission for call-up. So it's a good time for them to go back out to the community. They've got the comments from staff. They've gone through DRC review. The project is pretty far along in the process and in that final form for them to go back out and actually meet with the neighborhood that's affected by the development to get their feedback and input. I'm going to call it the Leanne Barber Amendment. Short-term rentals. So as Daphne said, the state attempted this year to take away a lot of local control, turn that over to the State Department of Professional and Business Regulation. End of the day, status quo. Our ordinance is still in effect, and we're still able to enforce as we have been. Earlier in the year, we've kind of held off on this a little bit because we wanted to see what the state did and how that played out, but the commission did direct us to make some amendments to the short-term rental code. They asked us to analyze the registration fee, and what we can really do with that is make sure we're getting full cost recovery for the costs of the registration program and you know, the inspections and things associated with that. The second thing they asked us to do was to increase the fines for violations related to vacation rentals, everything from being found to not be registered to violations related to the short-term rental. And then the last thing they asked us to do is to require owners of vacation rentals to install a noise monitor. So that device, it would not be monitored by the city, it would not record audio, it would not track anything or record conversations or anything like that. It specifically just looks at decibel levels and when they peak and when they don't. And if we get noise violations, what the ordinance would require and the registration would require is that if the city asked to see that data on the noise monitor, we could get that from the owner and then use that to verify a call for service for noise and things like that. So I think there are 3 pretty good improvements. Other cities have done it, and you know, I think it'll be a good addition to our program. So code enforcement liens. Hopefully none of you all have code enforcement liens, but what we have found through the budget process and what our audit review committee has told us is that we have, I think it's somewhere in the upwards of $60 million in unpaid code enforcement fines and liens on the books. A lot of this isn't really hard costs. It's daily fines that have accrued. Properties may be in compliance, they may not be, but it's just a lot of money on the books. Some of it is hard costs. We do charge administrative costs for things like inspections, case preparation, going to hearings, things of that nature, but the bulk of it's accruing daily fines. So what we have done in the past and what we're going to propose probably to start in October if the commission approves it, is to have a lien amnesty program, which will send out notices to anybody with a lien. And what they'll be able to do is, if the property is in compliance, they can come in and apply for lien amnesty, and we'll reduce that lien down to a percentage of the total, and they'll have to pay it, or if they don't pay it, you know, it'll revert back to what it was before. But it's a way to help clean our books. It's also a way to say, if you're not in compliance, get in compliance, we can go through the amnesty program. So I think twofold. One, we will probably receive some funds that we need. And 2, we may get more properties that come into compliance to take advantage of this program. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the administrative approval process, and I'll do that quickly. So a lot of you are familiar with how projects get approved originally, whether that's through DRC, the Planning and Zoning Board, or City Commission, but there are often times that projects, once they get that approval, for various reasons, they may change a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. So that process, I think, is probably a little less known about than the actual approval process. So administrative approval is pretty much when a project changes slightly, right? So think like maybe a little less height, maybe a little more height, maybe a little less setback, maybe a little more setback. It's not a wholesale change to a project. And when that happens, it's usually called an administrative review. So we have a section of code that determines when an amendment to a site plan level 3 or 4 can be done administratively. Site plan 3 and 4s are those that either went to Planning and Zoning Board and or the City Commission. So this does not include the allocation of additional units, but it may include a change in density depending on the situation. So we can approve those changes at the department level. Things like a reduction in floor area or height, so the project's getting smaller, so it's not increasing in mass or size. An interior modification that doesn't, affect the exterior of the building. So if they move units around or increase a parking deck or something like that that doesn't exchange that exterior feature of the building. Minor cosmetic alterations, and increasing the yards or setbacks. So that's shrinking it, providing more space around the edges. So there's also a process that involves the commission with a call-up, and that would be if they are increasing the floor area or height up to 5%. And then they're modifying the yards or setbacks by 5% as long as they don't encroach into the setback limit. So sometimes you'll get projects that don't really take up the whole setback that they're allowed to have, but they may come back and they want to go a little bit further into the setback, but they don't actually cross the setback limit. Those can be done administratively as well. So, and those get a call up if they come in that way. If a project is in excess of what can be approved by the department, it's reviewed by the department, and then it goes back to the entity that made the final approval. So if it's a level 3, it was approved by the Planning and Zoning Board last, it would go to the Planning and Zoning Board for approval. If it went to commission, it'd go back to commission. If it goes to PZB, the commission still gets a call up. So again, small tweaks, department handles for the most part, possibly with a notification of the commission. Bigger things can be done by the department, but would end up going back before that body that made the original decision. So slight differences. We got a question about the increase of density. So there's a couple ways that we look at density. So not changing, but yeah, there we go. So density is one of two ways. So you have areas of the city that don't allow residential by right. There are mixed-use areas like our racks and corridors. They either use rack units or flex units. So those units have to be allocated by the city commission. So any change to increase those unit allocations to a project that's amending its site plan, that's always going to go back to the commission to get those units allocated. Projects in areas that have residential by right and they have a density limit based on the land use, so like an RMH 60, that's 60 units per acre, or an RM 25, that's 25 units per acre, those don't have to go back to the commission. They could potentially change those densities as long as they stay within that density limit. So I think the question was, if a developer buys a project that already has 100 units, right, and they want to increase it to 120, what's the process? So if it's in a rack or a mixed-use area and they're using flex or rack units, they have to go back to the commission to get that done. It's just not done by staff. It's not done in a vacuum. It's a process, and it's public and open to that kind of scrutiny. But if it's in an area that allows residential by right, as long as they don't exceed that density from the land use, that can be done administratively if it meets those criteria that I mentioned before about administrative review procedure. So it's a little bit complicated, a little bit cumbersome, but that's kind of the ins and outs and the basic premise behind it. So that is all I have.
Chris, thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive review of the process. And as community leaders, I think it's important for you to have a good awareness of that, because it may happen in your neighborhood that you have to have a conversation with DRC or with planning and zoning, go before them, make a presentation on behalf of your neighborhood. So understanding the process, I think, is really important for all of you. Questions? We're only going to take 3 questions because we're kind of running a little late now, and our guests from Waste Management have been very patient. Thank you very much. They're going to do a presentation also, a short one, but thank you. Questions?
The tree ordinance. Leanne Barber, Flagler Village. All of our old growth trees are being cut down in Flagler Village, so we want to know if there's transparency over the number or types of trees that are being cut down, the fines that are being gathered, and what happens to the money.
Yeah, so as far as transparency, I mean, it's a permitting process, so there's a permit record. So when somebody comes in with an application to remove a tree, that tree is evaluated based on the species of tree and the condition of the tree. And then there's a formula in the code, and that's one of the things we're working to tweak, but it tells us what the mitigation for removal of that tree is. So typically that mitigation is either the replacement of a certain number and types of trees on site, so new trees, or a payment into the tree mitigation trust fund in an equivalent value to what those trees would have been. So those are really, well, the third option is obviously they could just keep the tree. So again, it's transparent in that we do require permits for that, so there is a permit record, and the mitigation, whether it's new trees or money, the money does go into the tree preservation trust fund.
Paul Bernice and Landings Residential Association. I wanted to ask you about those inspections you were talking about earlier on. Is there an inspection requirement for residences within 3 miles of the beach coming in 2025?
So Broward County, when they determined how they were going to follow the state law, determined that the law would apply citywide or countywide, essentially. So the state did have a requirement about being within 3 miles of a waterway. Broward County said, no, we're just going to say everybody has to follow this requirement.
So how would that work for a resident in the HOAs? They're going to have somebody come to their door, they're going to
So,
inspect the house?
yeah, so I should have mentioned the exceptions. So single-family homes, duplexes are exempt from that rule. It's really multifamily, things over 3 units, and then any other structures over 3,500 square feet, but not single-family or duplexes.
Okay, in regards to those lien chart you showed there, the foreclosure of a house, and we've had several on the landings, we understood that the liens are not paid by the bank when they foreclose it, will not pay, they don't pay liens, is that correct?
Typically it is, yeah.
Oh.
So when a house is foreclosed on, we do usually lose our lien because we're not the primary lien on a property. A lot of times that's the mortgage holder, and sometimes in those situations with a foreclosure, there could be tax liens as well. So our lien gets pushed further and further down in that queue of who gets paid back at the end of the day. We do see a lot of lien repayments and reduction requests through other transactions, other sales transactions. So we actually saw an uptick when the market was kind of hot in the last few years because there were a lot of transactions going on, a lot of sales and things like that. So we did see a lot more payment or reductions in payments. But yeah, in foreclosures, we're usually at least past the mortgage, if not further down in that list of liens on the property.
Chris, Ann Hilmer, Idlewild. I've got a couple questions. It's all in regard to one issue. Okay, on the administrative bypassing things. Is there something that defines what you're allowed to administratively give up or allow the developer to do? Because in the case of BHMR at DRC, your staff recommended that they increase the height of the building of the hotel to make the openings wider, but it never went back for new plans or anything. And they also added rooftop features that weren't in the initial plans, and it was just like people were blindsided the night it was presented. So how does that work? That just doesn't seem fair to the citizens.
Yeah, so that's within the DRC process. So the plans change, and they often do, especially for larger projects during the DRC process before it gets to that approving body. So I think that's what you're talking about is they had an application, they went to a DRC meeting, they received comments, they worked with staff, the plans changed. By the time it got back to commission, it was different, right? Yeah, so that's a different process. So I think when we look at how we're going to address those statutory timelines for how long we have to review projects, one of the things we're looking at is that a project won't be complete until, essentially, we do completeness now prior to that DRC meeting. We're looking at making that DRC meeting the completeness for determining when that project is complete. So I think that will probably cut down on post-DRC meeting changes, but what you're talking about doesn't fall under the administrative review because it's still part of that DRC process. Yeah.
Excuse me, there are other people here with questions, and our time is limited here. I'm sorry.
Do you want to address that real quick, can you?
Yeah, so with PDDs in particular, there's different public participation requirements before the public meeting. So before it goes to Planning and Zoning Board, and before it goes to Commission, they have to go back out to the public and do outreach on that project. Planning and Zoning Board is also another public meeting to have that input on the design. But typically between that first DRC meeting and whatever that next meeting is, there's not a public opportunity.
Hi, I'm Michelle Jenkins, Historic Dorsey Riverbend. It's also on the DRC. I think you may have already answered my question, but you mentioned that more civic participation. Currently, the DRC meets, during the day, and that, especially in my community, that prevents many people from attending some of the meetings. Is it televised or is there any way to see the meetings if you're not able to leave your job to come?
Yeah, so you're right. The meetings start about 9:30 every other Wednesday, I believe it is, at our DSC building, which is right up the street. They are not televised. We did tape them, and I think we did stream them during COVID. It's something we've talked about doing again. It's something I'd support if we were able to do that. So, yeah, I think that's good input for sure.
All right, we're gonna have to wrap up the questions. This is an incredibly interesting topic, and we could probably have Chris up here all night. I don't think he wants to be up here all night, but there's a lot to talk about. You have a presentation from solid waste and the waste management folks, so I'd like to bring them up. Chris, thank you. What would you recommend the best way to reach out to you? Here it comes.
There you go.
Here we go.
954-828-5980, ccooper@fortlauderdale.gov.
So if you have questions beyond tonight, I'm sure you will, and they're going to probably develop over time. I would recommend that you contact Chris, and someone on his staff will get back to you. You can take a picture, but this will all be posted on on the council's website. So thank you again, Chris. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just real quick, Bill just reminded me, we do come to HOAs and make presentations on processes and things like that. We're actually going to be with Central Beach Alliance next week on the 22nd. So if that's something you would like us to do, let us know, and we're happy to come out and do that for you.
Fantastic, thank you. So our next speaker, Melissa Doyle. Melissa Doyle is the program manager for solid waste with the city of Fort Lauderdale. And Melissa was the individual responsible for bringing those nice green bags that you all have. So thank you, Melissa, for that. Much appreciated.
Thank you
and then
so much.
she's going to introduce some of our partners from Waste Management about their new program as they take over for the current waste disposal company.
Close. Hi, good evening, everybody. Melissa Doyle. I'm the program manager for solid waste and recycling here at the city. As Mr. Concanon indicated, we brought these lovely party favors for you that were prepared not only by my team at the city, but also with our team here at Waste Management. Did want to take an opportunity before we begin to introduce Andres Limones Cruz and also Don McCormick, who'll be giving a very brief presentation on waste management and their transition to providing service for us here at the city of Fort Lauderdale. So you may or may not be aware that in January, our city commission did award a brand new 7-year contract to Waste Management, and that will impact any residential customers that are currently being provided service by the city. So if you have a green, blue, or black city cart, Waste Management will be your service provider, and that'll be effective Monday, July 31st. So we were invited by Mary and, of course, by Mr. Concanon to come and give you just a brief overview of why Waste Management was selected, some of the unique characteristics that they're going to be able to contribute to us in our communities and on our routes, and certainly answer any questions that you may have. Before we finish up, and I know we're a little tight on time, I did want to share with everybody in the bags, my business card is in there. Please note that the bags highlight our Green Your Routine program. I see many of you and know that many of you are active in our Green Your Routine program, and we thank you for that. If you aren't and you're interested, please call me or email me. That information is on my card. As well, we are looking for opportunities to come out and answer any questions that you may have at your HOA or Civic Association meetings related to recycling, collection, bulk pickup, anything along those lines. If that's something that you are interested in scheduling, again, please reach out to me directly using that information on the card, and we'll be happy to get those scheduled. So with no more ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Andres.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Good evening, and thank you for having us here. No, it's been an interesting day, a lot of rain, but thank you for coming. My name is Andres Limones Cruz. I'm your local congressman, and with me is also Don McCormick, as Melissa said. She's our Director of Communications. Let me share how excited we are to start being your service provider. As Melissa mentioned, July 31st.
Down arrow.
Wrong side, I guess. My bad. Oh, No, I went too fast. All right. So, as some of you may know, it all started here for us with Wayne Huizenga, our founder. And throughout this 60 years, we become North America's leader in sustainability and environmental solutions. And we're ready to be part of Fort Lauderdale starting July 31st. But don't take our word on why we are the best company. As you can see, we have several organizations that have given us several accolades and awards. Fortune has named us a world most admired company. We are one of the top 100 most sustainable companies. And also, I can tell you, one of the best companies to work for, and I'm very proud to be representative of Waste Management. What does it mean for you? Having a national company with our footprint, it gives you peace of mind. So unfortunately, as you know, our West Coast was hit by Hurricane Ian. It brought a lot of destruction to our neighbors. We also experienced some damage. Our WM Lee County facility suffered big damage. Our trucks, we lost 80 trucks, actually. But we were able to bring resources, employees and trucks from all over the state and all over the country. As soon as Lee County gave us the green light, we were ready to jump in service. So that is something that gives you peace of mind, that if something were to happen like this, and we pray that it doesn't, Waste Management is ready to service. Locally, we have a big presence. You can see we have over 200 trucks here in Broward County. Similar, Miami-Dade County, we have Palm Beach surrounding areas. So we count with a big footprint around that can help us. And in terms of any issue, we have the support from our partners. Let me share something about here in Fort Lauderdale. We have already 27 drivers that have been already selected. These are experienced drivers. Waste Management puts a lot of effort in training on safety and customer service. Our drivers are excited to be part of Fort Lauderdale. Some of them actually live here. We have several people that are your neighbors. Our CNG trucks are ready to go. We're very happy and excited to be, on the streets. We've been working very closely with Melissa and her team. And let me publicly say, her team has been very professional, excellent. It is making the transition very fun. We've been working really close together. We started with the bulk already in March, and it was a great opportunity for us to work together. And obviously, nothing is perfect, but we're ready here to jump in and solve any issues. We also had the opportunity to work on a car delivery emergency as a response for the flood. So Waste Management wanted to show that we're a true partner. And when the city called to us, we're ready to jump in. Now, let me just take a moment to show you our best asset. So our people is what makes us different. In that slide, you have over 235 years of experience, of industry experience. I call it the A-team. So we have a local team that is dedicated fully for Fort Lauderdale. Our route manager, Jermaine Priel, Cleanne Smith, Ashley McCall. We're going to be working alongside with myself, dedicated to Fort Lauderdale, to answer any questions. You have the numbers from the city, but if you need anything, you can reach out to me as well. We also created a dedicated website for the city to make it convenient to access information. You have also additional services. You can pay online. It's going to be live by the start of the contract. So it's going to have that handle. We're also going to have postcards that we're going to send with a QR code that is going to direct to that website. So you should be good to access that. There's not going to be major changes. Most of your services are going to stay the same. The only minor change is going to be some areas are going to move the recycling collection from Wednesday to Saturday. We show there in the map. We're willing to go to HOA, as Melissa said, to discuss any questions that you may have, any concerns you may have. We're here and ready to answer and present. You will receive postcards with this information. Every resident who's affected is going to receive a postcard. And now to share what makes us a sustainability leader is Dawn McCormick.
Hi, thanks, Andres. Pleasure to be here tonight. I'm Director of Communications for the whole state, but I'm based here in Palm Beach County and spend a lot of time talking to groups about recycling and sustainability. This is just a quick slide. Our 2030 goals as a corporation, again, North America's largest residential recycler, but we have sustainability goals in safety. I want to say that our Florida area already exceeds that goal. We have a very safe operations here that we'll be bringing to the streets of Fort Lauderdale. Circularity has to do with our recycling numbers. We have a goal of 25 million tons by 2030. I'm going to show you where we're already well on our way to that. Climate impact, we have a lot of initiatives to capture greenhouse gas emissions, including at our landfill at Monarch Hill, which is on Sample Road. We take the landfill gas there and we actually make electricity and put it onto the grid. We power 9,000 homes a day with the landfill gas from Monarch Hill. We have social impact goals with our charitable contributions, and I oversee that. And inclusion, equity, and diversity, we have goals for getting more women in leadership positions and more people of color. Again, just a slide about recycling. If you ever ask that question, does what I recycle really get recycled? It does. WM recycled 15 million tons of material last year. Your material, we have processed that for many years at Rooter Recycling, which is in Pembroke Pines. And I can say that when you send us your good, clean paper, cardboard, bottles, cans, and tins, it does get recycled. I want to tell you a little bit more about that. But we are also shaping recycling markets. I think that slide got a little wonky, but WM has made some major investments in recycling. We're very bearish on it. $275 million in investments in recycling and infrastructure just last year. We've also made a commitment to invest another $525 million over the next 3 years. So we're over $1 billion between now and 2025. So recycling is alive and well. Don't believe what you hear from NPR and some of the naysayers about recycling, but it's a major commitment that WM has made to recycling and sustainability. This is just a quick slide about all of the technology that goes into our sites. We are now using robotics, optical sorters, intelligent sorting, cameras, everything to make sure that when you send us your recyclables, we're capturing all of that valuable material and making it sure it's getting to end users. We've also announced about 3 or 4 months ago that we're committing $75 million to build a brand new facility here in Broward County. It's going to be next door to our Rooter Recycling in Pembroke Pines. It'll be the largest recycling facility in the southeastern United States. That's where all of your material goes when you put it curbside. We'll be able to process 60 tons per hour. We're going to be able to capture 95% of the material, which is far better than we're able to do today. And again, that's because we're using advanced technology, robotics, and other things. So we're really excited about this plant. We're going to be breaking ground in about 2 months. And you're welcome to come tour it. And just finally, a couple of things. The question is, what happens to my recyclables? Are you really utilizing it? We are. We have a partnership with a company called Continuous. They're taking some of our plastic and paper. They're actually making roofing material for facilities, and that's a major investment that we've made because we're helping to make sure there's also end markets for recycling. It's very important. We also have another partnership with a company called Reprieve. They take your plastic water bottles, they spin it and make yarn, and they make some of gym shoes. They actually make WM uniforms that our drivers wear are now made out of recycled water bottles. So again, we're committed to making those end markets. So just want to let you know that recycling is live and well. We're pleased to be not only your collector for your residential material, but we're also your processor. So happy to answer any questions you might have about the service we're going to be providing or about recycling.
We'll take 2 questions I'd love to give you more time, but we're going to get kicked out of here, and we still have a few things.
And I think the Panthers are playing in a few minutes, too.
Ed?
See, now
What-
we gotta leave.
Quick question. What do you do with all the paper? We hear that there's not a market out there. China used to take a lot of our paper. They don't want it anymore. What are you doing with it?
Right. The China Sword, National Sword Green Fence did put a shock wave through the recycling markets going back 4 or 5 years. The good news is tremendous amount of investment in recycling infrastructure in the States. Currently, 75% of our paper, cardboard and mixed paper, is recycled here in the United States. There's still a little bit of an export market, Thailand, Malaysia, a few other marketplaces. The good news also on the plastics front, when I'm talking water bottles, your Tide bottles, and your yogurt containers, is 100% of the plastics that Waste Management manages in the United States stays domestically. So we have markets for all of the good plastic you send us. Bottles, jugs, and tubs, we like to say. And if you send us that, it is being recycled. Right now, there's 3 to 4 times of a demand for recycled plastic than we can actually supply. And the reason that is a lot of your companies, whether it's your water bottles, your Coke bottles, your Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, your shampoo bottles, most of the brands now have minimum content legislation, which means they have to make their new containers with some recycled content. So the brands are clamoring for more recycled plastic. So when you give us your material, it is getting recycled, and there's a demand. So the state of Florida is the only state in the country that gives recycling credits for waste to energy. So if your garbage goes to Wheelabrator, which it does, they do give you recycling credits for it, but it's not recycling in the sense that you're not making a new water bottle or a new uniform from it. So it's far better to actually separate your material and put your good, clean recyclables in the right container.
Thoughts
We have
on-
one more question?
Thoughts on composting? What happens to the yard waste? Can we get a composting operation going in Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah, I'll defer to Melissa on composting.
So the city does a separate collection for yard waste residentially, and that goes in your green cart if you live in a single-family home. Waste Management actually takes that material for us at their Oaks Road facility. That material is sorted, sifted, and is reused largely for agricultural purposes. So we don't do large-scale composting yet because we do not have a source to be able to process the volume of material. And frankly, we don't have a lot of other municipalities, which is, of course, the largest consumer, if you will, that is sending material to processors. So Fort Lauderdale, as far as I know, is the only city that does a separate yard waste collection outside of Hollywood, which offers it every other week as their bulk pickup. So I think that answers your question, Leanne.
Well, with that, I'm going to say thank you very much to our friends at Waste Management. We'll look forward to the service you're going to provide to us. And thank you very much, Melissa, for bringing the bags and our guests. Thank you very much. So that concludes our guest presentations tonight. Bill Brown has one item that he would like to bring up. And then I have, we're going to defer you have a copy of the, and you saw the copy of the agenda. I'm going to defer the P3 committee. Marilyn Mamano is out sick, and I don't know if I'm going to have time for my charter revision, but we could do that next time. Bill?
I'll be very brief. Can I get a show of hands first of how many people know about the Stranahan House? Okay, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but it's a historical home. We've been asked, the Council of Civic Associations, along with the City of Fort Lauderdale and the Mayor's Office, for a letter of support for a capital campaign fund that they're doing for, long-term for many of the projects that they want to do. And they're applying for a $500,000 grant from the state of Florida Arts and Cultural Division. It does not cost the citizens of Fort Lauderdale. There's no matching funds. There's no cost to the Council of Civic Associations. But in order for them to submit the grant application, they need a letter of endorsement from the Council of Civic Associations and the City of Fort Lauderdale, which the City of Fort Lauderdale, the mayor's office, has done so. And we just need an approval from the membership to do that. What they're going to be adding is, for past 35 years, there's been no substantial improvements done to the Stranahan House per se, other than routine maintenance. They're wanting to do remodel some of the bathrooms and make them more handicap accessible. Event center, new kitchen catering event, a visitor center. So they really want to improve that project, that house. It's a historical home here in Fort Lauderdale. Mrs. Stranahan was one of the very first public education teachers in the city of Fort Lauderdale for over 60 decades. She was very active in the community as a community activist, and that's why I would encourage a membership to endorse allowing the president to submit a letter in support of, and I would ask a motion be made, and once we get the motion, we'll take questions.
Do you have a microphone, Michael, please? Could you repeat? We can't hear
Donna
you.
Mergenhagen, Palmer Village. I'd like to make a motion that the council support via a letter the application of the Stranahan House. Their planned improvements would be a wonderful auxiliary to the Tunnel Top Park.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Ann Hilmer Idlewild, second.
Excellent. The motion passes. There's no discussion, I don't think, on that. It's
Okay,
kind of
motion passes. And if you want to see the drawings of what they're planning on doing, it was sent out in the,
Excuse me, we need a vote.
oh, okay.
We have to vote
I'll-
first.
I'll-
The motion passed. Everyone in favor? Aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes.
And just like I said,
Thank
it was
you.
attached to the notice of the meeting tonight.
Right.
That you can go in and look. There's a link that'll open that up and shows you the plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Review and acceptance of the minutes. Would someone move to accept the minutes from the last meeting?
I'd like to make the motion to accept the minutes.
Michael, second. The motion has been seconded. The motion passes. The meeting minutes from the last meeting are approved. Treasurer's report. Can you do that?
Okay, so Treasury's report is as of today, June 13, 2023. In our Truist Primary Business Checking Account, we're now at $7,718.76. Council PayPal account has not changed since last month. It's a flat 1,000. And our total is $8,718.76 in all accounts. There's an attached membership log to the treasurer's report showing 39 paid civic associations who are paid through next fiscal year end, which is June. Sorry, I'm forgetting the fiscal year end. It's March 31, 2024. So sorry about that. So anyway, that means we still can certainly take renewals from at least perhaps 30 other civic associations. And I know that Mary and I will be following up with anyone who hasn't renewed. Please do so that you can be a voting member of the council. And I'll take any comments or questions.
No comments or questions?
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Melinda. Thank you. Well, with that, I would like to close the meeting. Would someone move the close the meeting? So moved. Anyone second? Second. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for coming tonight. We ran over a little bit. We had a lot of material, and we could go on for quite some time. Thank you very much for being here tonight.